Well, welcome to the Post Sunday app. Thanks for joining us on this video. We're glad you're with us today. I don't know if many people are aware, but there's this little thing called a Cardinal Cub divisional series going on right now. I wore this shirt, just you're a Texan. I wasn't sure you were aware of the Cardinals and the Cubs. Probably more focused on the Rangers.
Right.
Not really the Astros, more the Rangers.
Not as much, more the Astros, or more the Rangers.
Okay.
Although we lived in Houston for a little while, so it's kind of a Nolan Ryan fan. We moved to Arlington to follow him, or to the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
But no, I suspected there was something going on, but I thought that everyone was just wearing red and blue to support the Rangers.
Oh.
So I thought, man, all my Cardinals and Cubs, we're talking about reconciliation. And so I thought the Texas Rangers are bringing these Cubs and Cardinals fans together, reconciling the blue and the red in one uniform. And but that's not the case. Reconciliation has not taken place yet.
Yeah, and I wore the shirt hoping that might give some good vibes for the Cardinals tonight. This is Monday that we're shooting this, so I don't know if it'll work, but I'm a little scared about tonight.
So good. What's the theology behind good vibes, Ben? Do we need to edit that out?
Probably.
Okay. No. All right.
So there's more important things to talk about.
Right, good vibes.
Yeah, 2 Corinthians 5, 18 through 21 was our sermon, Missions and the Ministry of Reconciliation. So we're in the midst of our missions week, our focus here with the Bethany Fellowship of Churches on our global outreach program. And so you took a detour from our Old Testament study to talk about this, and you'll be doing this next week, this coming Sunday as well.
Lord willing, yeah.
So the message, the big idea for the message, missions is the ministry of proclaiming the good news that one can be reconciled to God. So you started off the sermon with some comments that maybe I thought some people might ask some questions on. I don't think we got any questions, but kind of saying this is what missions is and this is what missions is not.
Right, or even there's a lot of different events or tasks or ministries in the broadest sense of the term that sometimes we call missions. So a person does something, I did that was missions, or someone does something else, that was missions. And so just think about how to use that word with more precision, or at least biblically when I describe the task of gospel proclamation, what am I doing? And just going out and doing nice things for people isn't biblically what we're talking about when we talk about sharing the gospel, the good news of Jesus.
Yeah. One question that came in then was if that is our goal in missions, to talk about reconciliation, how do we do that in a mission field that doesn't believe in God? So if your audience says there is no God, how do you get to reconciliation from there?
Right. Well, I look at the book of Acts, and we see Paul responding to different people in different ways. And so you see there are the people who are very hardened in their belief about, or in their unbelief, and so Paul really doesn't spend a lot of time with people. If people say, what you're saying is crazy, and I have no interest in thinking about this thing, the resurrection is a joke, he doesn't really seem to spend a lot of time with those people. But he'll go to a lot of different audiences, and in these different audiences he'll talk about the gospel, and there'll be people who respond in some degree. And the way he presents it is different based on where people are spiritually, or even in terms of what they know. So a Greek audience might have less understanding than a Jewish audience, and so I think that's how we approach it. If I'm approaching an audience that says, "Look, what you're saying about Jesus is crazy because I don't even believe in a God," well, I still want to have a relationship with them, pray with them, but there's really not a lot I can do if they're not willing to have a dialogue about that, to convince them of the truth of that. And so I still love them and continue to live my life and as a reconciled person to God.
I like what you said too, if they're not willing to have a dialogue. Because I think we can, you don't believe there's a God? Well, let me start on my 18-point reasons why, and you're going to listen to me.
Right.
If the person's not willing, might be more damage than good.
Yeah.
If they're not really wanting to have that dialogue.
Yeah, that's right. And so, so that's the key is gauging their receptivity. And I think we've mentioned this before, but C.S. Lewis one time said that people live consistently with what they really believe to be true. And I think sometimes if a person says, well, I don't believe in God, and I believe that we're just maybe a process of these natural, or the end result of this natural process. They say, okay, well, if it's true, what do we do with concepts like love and justice and truth, and those things aren't really real then if that's true, and yet don't you kind of live in a way that's consistent with those things being true? So you kind of show how the naturalistic worldview doesn't hold consistently to how they actually live.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
one way I'd approach it, if there's willingness to have a dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Well, this idea of reconciliation, when someone says, hey, Pastor Daniel's going to preach on missions,
Right.
maybe they think the book of Acts or
Right.
Matthew 28, the Great Commission, but you spend this time on the central heart of the gospel. What is reconciliation? One question came in that's how does having a better understanding of reconciliation shape what I do missionally or with missions?
Yeah. So maybe not even just missionally, but just practically how I live is kind of how I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to an interesting podcast from, I think it was This American Life, maybe something else, but there was I'm going to butcher the story a little bit and just kind of try to truncate it, but there was a man who moved to the United States from China, and he had a son. And the son grew up only speaking English. His dad had to work long hours, and his dad only spoke Chinese. And so this father and son were unable to communicate with each other. And then when the boy turned about 14 years old, his dad wrote him a letter and had someone translate it for him. And they interviewed the boy, and the boy said, for the first time, I understood how my dad felt about me. He said, I lived 14 years thinking my dad was kind of cold and didn't have any use for me and thought I was kind of a nuisance. And he says it was like a 6-page letter, and he just cried every sentence that he read, and read it over and over and over again. And I think the same is true with our relationship with God. If we don't understand who God is and how he feels about us and how he loves us, then it's going to affect what we view about him and how we live our lives. Maybe so I've got this God who's just angry at me all the time, and yeah, he'll save me, but he's kind of reluctant about it, and it's more like just, okay, I'm going to save you, but now you better toe the line. When instead, what we see is God communicates who he is to us through Scripture is, look, I want to be reconciled to you, not just have you justified, not just declared righteous, but reconciled and brought into relationship with me.
Yeah, yeah.
So it affects how we do missions, it affects how we live our life, everything.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, looking forward to hearing the second part
Yeah.
2, this Sunday, Lord
Yeah,
willing.
that's right.
So great. Well, I'm going to be very other-centered right now and
Yeah,
say,
good.
Go Rangers.
Oh, that's very sweet. I would say go Cardinals, but I think we'd have a church split.
That's true.
How about go Cardinals and Cubs? I hope it's a tie.
Very good. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, and
Sunday.
mission stuff. Encourage people to do some mission things this week.
Yes. So this Wednesday night there is a family meal here at Bethany Community Church.
And no Cubs Cardinal game Wednesday night, is my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't even know. But sure, even if there was, we would
This
come
would be
together
more
here
important, yeah.
at 5 o'clock for a meal here. Thursday night, there's a speaker talking about the Islamic faith and how it relates to Christian faith at Bethany Baptist Church. Saturday night, there's an event here starting at 4 o'clock, games, fun, 5 o'clock meal. Connect with our Go partners there as well. I might be missing a few things. Those are some of the big highlights from this week. So there you have it. Hope to see you at some of those events, and thanks for being with us in the Post Sunday app. Well, welcome to the Post Sunday app. Thank you for joining us today on this video. Daniel, you did something unique again. You're always surprising us.
Well,
at Bethany Community Church.
Surprising.
But 2 chapters in one sermon, Genesis 6 and 7.
Yeah.
So someone asked a question about this.
Yeah.
Right? You had a couple questions about this.
Yeah, good questions.
Is preaching on 2 chapters at once, is that expository preaching? How would you answer that?
Well, it's a great question, and ideally, when I'm preaching it expositionally, which we kind of define expositionally as, okay, here's what expositionally means: I'm taking what the text says and I'm explaining it. Here's what the message was to the original audience, and then I'm applying it to our contemporary situation. So that's the essence of expository preaching. And ideally, I would say, in an expository message, you're taking a paragraph, a thought unit, and you're walking through that thought unit.
Right.
And then you're not just taking that paragraph and that thought unit one week and then going someplace else and taking another paragraph another week. You're working sequentially through a book of the Bible or a larger portion of Scripture. Now, I wish that I could do that with every passage in Scripture, but I'm dealing with a finite amount of time. And so I did the math on this last night, actually, and I can't remember everything, but I think there's something like 31,000 Bible verses.
Okay.
And if you assume each paragraph is about 5 verses, you say, well, let's say that's 6,000 messages it would take to do it at that level. I'm down to about 1,500, 2,000, maybe around 2,000 messages left if I live a normal lifespan and have the normal, say I'm in my late 60s or so when I stop preaching every Sunday. So I need 3 lifetimes to do it at that level, right. And I wish I had them. And if someone has an idea of how other people have done this, then I would love to hear it.
Open to hearing it. Yeah.
So there's a couple things you can do. You can say, well, I'm just going to focus on the New Testament and preach through that every verse, or I'm going to preach this kind of through different sections, large portions. Mm-hmm. What I've opted to do is I've taken all of Scripture and I've said, okay, here are the chunks of Scripture. You got the Pentateuch, you have the prophetic major prophets, and then you have the minor prophets, and you have the historical books, and you have the wisdom literature in each New Testament book. And I've said, okay, how do I take this document, the Bible, and preach the whole counsel of God in the next 35 years or so, 35 years. And I've realized, well, for sure, at least in the narrative sections, I'm going to need to take larger chunks. And so I'm taking a couple chapters at a time as we go through Genesis. And I've said, well, about 1.5 years through the Pentateuch, and then I do this. And it's still going to be tight, And the Lord may return tomorrow, and it's all, at least you tried. Yeah. What I still have to do, so this isn't how I would ideally go through Genesis. Ideally, I would cover each verse and talk about it for a few minutes, and then talk about the next verse and have a big theme for every paragraph. But it's what we're still doing is we're still allowing the text to control the message. Right. This is, the message is coming from the text. I'm explaining the text and applying it. Mm-hmm. And what I would that's why I encourage people as we talk about the Pentateuch, I encourage them to be reading it on their own so that you're getting every verse and getting the full impact of expositional preaching. And I don't know of a pastor who's solved this problem perfectly, and if people have better suggestions, I would love to grow and learn in this too. So, yeah. Good question.
Well, yeah, when you brought up that question, I thought that these principles they come from the text.
Right.
You're not just saying, look, here's the 2 chapters, let me just kind of bring in some random principles. The principles are God's judgment is slow, God's judgment is just, and God's judgment is terrible. Mm-hmm. And lastly, God's judgment is escapable. So pointing us towards the gospel. So a couple questions that came from the passage specifically here. Yeah. One is, what does it mean for God to be sovereign and yet be sorry for something he's done? Did he regretted making man? How do you handle that?
Boy, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad you're the same pastor.
Well, right now you are.
Yeah, at this moment.
Sometimes. Where were we? Speaking of regrets.
Right. What's it for God to be sovereign? Yeah, be sovereign.
Yeah, and so I think what Moses is using here is he's using some language to help us understand God's response to what's happened here. He's using what we call anthropomorphic language. He's using language that we use for humanity to help us understand some aspects of God.
Yeah.
I don't know how it all works out. I know that God doesn't change. I know that God doesn't make mistakes. And so I take those clear teachings of Scripture and apply it to a passage like Genesis 6:6. The Lord regretted that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. And so I think the point is not that, boy, I wish I could go back and do this differently. He's saying, okay, at this moment of time, as I look at man, there's a sense of this is not how I desire this to be, that regret in that sense. And there's grief in my heart. I'm sorry. And remember, God is eternal. He stands outside of time. And so he knows, as he looks at this event in time, he knows what the future holds. Mm-hmm. And so he regrets it, but he knows the end of the story. Mm-hmm.
So, and defining wickedness here, that's another question that came up.
Yeah.
Without the law being given, without the whole of the New Testament being written,
yeah.
How is this how do we know what pleases and displeases God
Yeah.
at this point in time in the biblical account?
I love that question because remember, Genesis is written after the law has been given. Moses is writing after the law. And so what this tells us is even Moses understands that the law that was given to Moses for the people of Israel wasn't the ultimate standard of righteousness. In other words, the law is given to a certain people at a certain time to help them obey God, but the essence of obedience is faith. Abraham, before the law is given, is said to keep God's laws, statutes, commandments because he lives by faith. And so Moses is judging wickedness by God's standard. Here's what it means to be obedient to God. And if you're not obedient to God, there's wickedness. You're not in conformity to his character. And righteousness, obedience before God, or I say righteousness, and then the obedience that flows from that comes from faith. And so that's the message of Genesis and the whole Pentateuch, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
the gospel before Christ.
Now, the intent of this passage does not say, so this therefore proves that there was a worldwide flood, or
Right.
archaeological evidence for this or that.
Right.
But what are some resources where you can point us, or what are some evidences that you think would just be helpful for us, extra biblical resources that help us to see that the flood is a literal thing that's happened?
Well, yeah, so I should have maybe talked more. Well, again, we let the text control, and I think the purpose of this text is to tell us that God saved. And I would also, I've read some books, read some resources that talk about the scientific evidence of the flood, and I don't feel like I have the scientific background to be able to discern even what are the best resources to use. I think the text is, where I begin with is the text, and I think the text is clear that this is worldwide and that all of humanity and everything that breathes perishes except those who are on the ark. And then you can look at different apologetics websites and things like that. We can put some links to those perhaps, and have just committed us to something.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I think we can do that in some of the comments on the YouTube video.
Right. With some some resources that describe that. I don't feel like I have the scientific background to make perfect determinations about here's exactly what a worldwide flood would do, and here's this fossil record supports this. But I think what we see even in Genesis, you have pre-flood, you have the flood, and then you have post-flood, and humanity changes in significant ways after the flood, and God's relationship with humanity through the Noahic covenant changes as well, and we'll talk about that when we pick back up in a few weeks after the missions conference.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to our missions conference.
Yeah.
It starts this next Sunday, and we'll have some missionaries, some Go partners in with us. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
And thank you, too, for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your day.